Hi everybody, Kiki here at Green Acres Nursery and Supply. And guess what we're talking about today? One of my all-time favorites, Japanese maples. So why would you want some of these beautiful Japanese maples in your garden? Well, I'll tell you why. Amazing color, beautiful texture. You can grow them in pots. You can grow them in the ground. They're like an accent of, like an art piece in your yard. They're just stunning. And again, they're really easy to grow once you know the key rules of it, and we'll go over that. The other thing is just there's lots of different varieties, and that's what's really exciting. If you're looking for certain colors and textures to add to your yard, this is gonna be a beautiful way to do it. One of the things that I did here today is I literally kind of created a small Japanese forest with all the different kinds of broadleaf, lace leaf, dwarf varieties, big upright varieties, and now we're gonna go take a look at some of them. It's happening already! The changing of the colors, right? That's why fall is one of the best times to buy Japanese maples. We also have a huge selection here during this time. But let's take a look at the two main variety types. One is the weeping variety. These guys are usually more dwarf-like. They're usually wider than they are taller. This one happens to be one called garnet. And look at how it's going from green into kind of a cool yellowish and then into this vibrant orange, which is a favorite of mine. And so then we go from the weeping lace leaf, right? This is how you describe the skinnier type of leaf. This is a lace leaf variety. And now we go over here to what we call the broadleaf or upright variety. These guys are gonna usually be much taller. This is a sangukaku, or otherwise known as the coral bark. This guy is probably gonna get up to 20 feet tall. And the coral bark, what's really neat about them is when you see the structure of their tree, they're like a broom. They're trunk and they're skinny, and then they shoot out their branches kind of like a broom. So they have a different kind of overall structure. The other thing that makes these guys so unique is the fact that they actually change the color of their bark when it starts to get cold, excuse me. So essentially, you're gonna eventually have the whole trunk be bright orange once the leaves are down. All right, there's more, there's more. Right off the bat, oh my gosh, the butterfly. Yes, there are variegated varieties of Japanese maples. This kind of looks almost like a combo between a lace leaf and a broadleaf. And you'll also notice that normally where there's that cream color, it's already starting to turn pink. And oh my gosh, what a beauty. And this is also an upright variety. So then right back here, this one is the Emperor One. Again, this is one that can acclimate to full sun. It's really cold hardy, heat tolerant, and this one has more of the deep, vibrant, reddish purple. An amazing tree. And again, 25 feet tall. This little guy next to it is the Bloodgood. This one also gets a little bit more purple. You can start to see that some of the green is already starting to change. It also gets a really nice dark bark, which is really, really pretty. And over here, the Siryu is saying, hey, what about me? What about me? So the Siryu is really cool because guess what? It's also an upright tree. This one probably will get around 12 feet or so. And you can see the new growth here is coming in bright green, but it's also gonna start turning a really beautiful golden color. This is the only lace leaf that can acclimate to full sun. So this one is a real keeper. And then we go further deeper into our little forest here. And I've surrounded myself now by some of the full sun, tried and true growers here in Sacramento. Again, we have a larger version of the coral bark. Again, you can really see that shaping I talked about where it looks like a broom. We also have this one over here. I had a person come over to me and say, I don't know, there's something wrong with my Japanese maple. It's got these weird little flower things with wings on it, and they're falling all over the place. And I said, oh my goodness, how exciting for you. You have the happiest seedling Japanese maple. And that's what it's referred to as, a seedling, because it will have little seed pods that fall down, and it's really, really beautiful. And last but not least, here is a larger version of the bloodgood, also a very popular tree that can acclimate to full sun. As you can see, there are so many varieties, and the best time to look for them is spring and right now, fall. Fall is when we're gonna have a lot of different Japanese maples. So I'm sure you're gonna find the perfect one for your space and for your exposure. And part of the joy is finding the right one that is gonna look great in your garden, and have fun with it. To me, that's the most important part of gardening. So next, what are we gonna talk about? Well, how do you plant a Japanese maple? Once you find your perfect tree, well, now we're gonna talk about planting it in the ground. So the first thing is size. How do we determine the size of the hole? It's determined by the size of the container it comes in. The general rule is twice as wide as the container and 1 deep, all right? Pretty simple. The next thing, we're gonna have our imaginary hole right here, okay? Now we're gonna fill that imaginary hole with water. Why? Because we wanna test drainage. Drainage is key with Japanese maples. You're gonna fill it with water, you're going to see how quickly it drains. If it sits around for 4 hours, you're gonna have to dig through the clay or the rocks, okay? If it drains well, awesome. We're on to our next step, which is gonna be elevation. You wanna make sure that the top of the tree is like 2 to 3 inches above the soil line, so it's slightly raised, because over time it's gonna settle, and this way it's gonna settle even with your landscape, all right? Next, what kind of soil do we wanna use? We wanna use some acidic amendment soil, and you're gonna mix that half and half with your native. You've got your imaginary hole, you have all your soil that you've just dug out of there. You're gonna split this bag open, you're gonna take some, and you're gonna mix it together, right? At the bottom of that hole, you're gonna make a small little pedestal, which you place the root ball on, and that way you can measure, you can see how raised above the soil line it is, and then you take your mixture that you've created and fill it in. But before you do that, make sure you put a little handful of Sure Start. If it's a 15-gallon, you'll want a cup. Read the directions on the amount. It's organic, it won't burn the tree, it's perfect. But it's really great soil biology that's gonna enhance your tree, all right? The last most important thing, moisture, moisture, moisture. Then you're gonna water this tree in really, really well. And your goal is to always keep the tree lightly moist, never dry, and never soggy. And that's it. But if you find that you really can't plant it in the ground, guess what? It's really easy to be able to plant your tree in a container. So we're gonna talk about that next. So if you happen to live in a small area, maybe you have just enough room on your balcony in your apartment, you can still have a Japanese maple. The best exposure for a Japanese maple in a pot is gonna be morning sun, afternoon shade, or a spot that gets filtered light all day long. The main thing you're also gonna wanna talk about then is what kind of pot can I put it in, right? You want something that has a thicker wall that's gonna insulate the root ball. It's gonna keep that root ball cooler, which is your goal, okay? Now, the other thing you're gonna do, it's gonna be the same thing. You're gonna use acidic potting soil 100%. Or you could also use a regular potting soil and then use an acidic fertilizer with it. But you want to make sure that you give the Japanese maple some acidity. Now you want to focus on elevating your pot off of the ground. Why? Because you don't want your roots growing through the drainage hole into the soil or just clogging up your drainage hole. It's as simple as that. The way you can do that, one of the things I like, when you have a potted tree, it can get really heavy. So if you automatically put it on wheels, then you can move it around very easily. But if you don't want to do that, then getting little potting feet is really, really helpful, because again, just elevating the pot off the ground, the roots detect the air, the roots won't go through the drainage hole, which is the main focus. Okay, the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you mulch a little bit. So depending on the size of your container, for a smaller container like this, I could use sphagnum moss, okay? You just always, when you're adding mulch, keep it around 2 inches away from the trunk. You want that to be free and clear for oxygen and airflow. For bigger pots, you could use a little bit of shredded bark, something like that. So the best variety to put in a container is definitely going to be the weeping variety. They have a tendency to be shorter and wider, so they're going to be a little bit more dwarf. You can plant some of the full sun varieties in containers. Those containers are going to have to be big, because remember, they get like 20 feet tall. They eventually might be a little top heavy, and the containers are going to dry out much quicker, so you have to be aware of that. Overall though, you guys, you can do it. It's fun, it's easy. It all depends on what you want in your garden. And as I hope I've shown you today, there is a huge selection, and you're gonna find something perfect for your exact spot. My biggest suggestion, follow your heart, find what you love, and then nurture it, whether it's in a container or the ground. All right, so now we've moved to the point where let's talk about just general care for your Japanese maple. Japanese maples like acidity, so after you've planted it originally in that acidic potting soil or the native acidic mix in the ground, then you're gonna wanna fertilize. Today I have 2 different varieties in front of me. This one is the EB Stone Azalea Camellia. This is more of an acidic fertilizer that you can use on all your acidic loving plants. It's organic, it's super gentle. You could use it up to every other month if you wanted to. Again, keep in mind that this plant goes into dormancy, so you wanna start cutting back from that once you start getting into fall. Just get an organic fertilizer that's either an acid mix or one that's specifically developed like this one for Japanese maple trees. So easy peasy. And again, they're so gentle, you could use them every other month if you wanted. But now let's talk about pruning. So you are gonna wanna get a really good pair of pruners, usually ones that have a little spring, so that if you have to do some heavier limbs, it's gonna be easy for you to cut with that. Now, first off, the basics of pruning is you can prune dead, diseased, and dying pretty much any time. The thing I'm gonna caution you about is avoiding doing that in high heat when it's really, really hot outside, because that's gonna be another way that you can dehydrate the tree, okay? So you wanna focus, your main architectural pruning is gonna be in the winter months when it's dormant, because then you can see the architectural or the actual form of the tree, the bones of it, so to speak, right? Another thing that you definitely wanna do is you wanna clean your pruning shears, which I've already done. You wanna clean them with either isopropyl alcohol or a mix of water and Clorox bleach. That would be 50-50. And the reason is, it's the easiest way in the world to pass on diseases or pathogens from one tree to another, or from one plant to another, if you don't clean your pruners. So really be diligent about that. You can always store your pruners in a bucket full of dry sand. It'll keep the rust off, which is also a thing that you always wanna make sure your pruners look great, so that when you make these cuts, it's pretty simple. Now let's talk about water. Water is essential to life, not only for us humans, but for a Japanese maple as well. And the main thing you wanna think about is the roots of the tree are gonna take in water and they're gonna take in oxygen. So it's usually a good idea that once you've watered it, you give it a break the next day so that it can get in that oxygen it needs too. So everything is kind of a balance. So when you're talking about watering of the tree, you basically want to make sure you are hydrating that root ball entirely. You want those emitters at what we call the drip line, okay? That's the edge of where the branches are, where you've got your leaves, and when it rains, it falls on the ground. That's gonna be your drip line. So as the tree grows, you wanna move that drip line, and guess what? That's also a good time to check your emitters. Are they clogged? Are they broken? You know, it's just simple things like that that can make a big, big difference in the life of your Japanese maple, especially during the summertime. Okay guys, well, I hope you've learned something today, and I hope I've given you good insight into all the different varieties, the uprights, the weepers, the lace leaf, the broadleaf, the fact that you can have different exposures. In general, they're gonna prefer part shade. The watering, fertilization, pruning, mulch, all of that. If you guys have any more questions, please come into any of our stores and ask us. We're more than happy to give you all the information you need for success, right? Because that's what we all want. And please don't be too hard on yourself. Remember, gardening, you win some, you lose some, but you're always learning, you're always growing, okay? Until the next time, guys, have a good one.